Good afternoon. The first item of business this afternoon is portfolio questions. The first portfolio is Rural Affairs, Land Reform and Islands. I advise members there is quite a bit of interest in supplementaries, so I will require brevity in questions and responses. As far as possible, I call first question number 1, Audrey Nicholl.
Sir, to ask the Scottish Government how its Marine Fund Scotland 2025 to 26 will support businesses and organisations in coastal communities.
Cabinet Secretary Marie Goujon.
Marine Fund Scotland is now open for applications this year with £14 million worth of support available. And I would urge all of those with ideas for projects to help marine industries to evolve and flourish to apply. Now, since 2021, the Marine Fund Scotland has awarded more than £55 million in grants to 330 projects, facilitating £121 million of investment. And with this funding, the Scottish Government is backing our marine economy, which is crucial to the economic, social and cultural fabric of our rural, coastal and island communities.
Audrey Nicholl.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her response, but I wonder if I can ask her further, by how much has Scotland's coastal communities been shortchanged by EU since Brexit? And is there any indication that the current UK Government is interested in giving Scotland its rightful share of marine funding?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think, well, if you were to compare us, if we were still in the EU at this point, or actually compare us to other nations within the EU right now, for example, Denmark, and through the EU's new European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund. Now, also bearing in mind that Denmark has a smaller sea area and marine sector than Scotland, yet they're receiving an equivalent of about £25 million per year, and that's multi-year funding. And this, of course, is compared to the £14 million worth of funding that we currently receive from the UK Government. Now, the UK Government did recently announce a new £360 million Fishing and Coastal Growth Fund, and we are calling for a rightful share of that budget to be devolved and allocated to Scotland. And I've pressed the UK Government for confirmation of this, but to date I haven't yet received a reply. I do share stakeholders' frustrations that the UK Government didn't engage with devolved nations or industry before announcing this new fund. And if it's not devolved, it does risk duplicating current funding programmes, causing confusion for stakeholders and really diluting the intended benefits of it too.
Supplementary. Finlay Cost.
Could the Cabinet Secretary set out how she could use the Marine Fund Scotland 2025-26 to support the sustainable management and potential reopening of the Solway cockery fishery, and how he expects projects to be successful and deliver long-term value when applicants may not receive confirmation of funding until late October, yet all work must be complete and expended by the end of March, a window of just 5 months, and makes a summer survey this year without other support impossible? And will the Cabinet Secretary agree to meet with me and stakeholders?
Cabinet Secretary.
One thing I would say is that I would encourage anyone with an interest to apply to the fund. I do know that officials would be working at pace to process those applications to ensure that there is a good chance of that money being fully utilised as well. In relation to, I think, the last point that Finlay Carson raised about meeting with his constituents, I'm more than happy to do that, and will of course be in touch to make those arrangements.
Thank you. Question 2, Stephen Kerr.
Can I first of all apologise, Presiding Officer, for my late arrival to the Chamber, to ask the Scottish Government what its position is on whether policies such as culling livestock and promoting less meat consumption could have a detrimental impact on the rural economy.
Minister Jim Fairley.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government does not have any policy of culling livestock or mandating reductions in meat consumption, because we recognise the vital role that livestock farming plays in supporting rural economies, food security and Scotland's cultural and natural heritage. Our approach is to support farmers and crofters to produce high-quality food sustainably, and meat is a good source of protein with a number of micronutrients and can be enjoyed as part of a healthy, balanced diet.
Well, I'm grateful to the Minister for that reply, and I would seek a further confirmation from him in respect to the policy position he just mentioned, because the UK Climate Change Committee has said that nearly half of the emission reductions by 2035 will come from cutting livestock numbers by 26% in Scotland. And we're already seeing the impact of these sorts of measures and this sort of direction of travel with the closure of the Scott Beef Abattoir in Inverurie, which is costing 90 jobs. And at this rate, it won't be net zero emissions by 2045, it will be net zero jobs. So will the Minister confirm, again, clearly, yes or no, whether these livestock cuts mentioned by the Committee for Climate Change whether these livestock cuts are official government policy?
Minister.
No, they are not official government policy. The CCC advice is exactly that. It's advice. So we will be setting out a response imminently to that advice. But let me be absolutely crystal clear. We intend to meet our net zero commitments in a way that supports our vital agricultural sector and our wider rural economy. Our livestock sector is a critical part of that. This government has no policy to reduce livestock. We actually pay for direct support. We're the only part of the UK that does pay their direct support, as is demonstrated by the Scottish Suckler Beef Calf Scheme, which pays £40 million a year directly into farmers' pockets.
Question 3, Tess White.
The Scottish Government what discussions the Rural Affairs Secretary has had with agricultural organisations regarding any increases in production costs as a result of new transmission infrastructure.
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government have not had any discussions with agricultural organisations regarding potential changes to production costs as a result of new transmission infrastructure. Applications for new transmission infrastructure are made under the Electricity Act 1989, which includes provisions to ensure that landowners receive fair compensation where land or rights over land are acquired by compulsion for the development of energy infrastructure, with established legal frameworks and dispute resolution mechanisms available through the court system.
Tess White.
That's deeply disappointing for farmers, Presiding Officer. Following my question in April on the loss of agricultural land to the development of overhead transmission lines, Jim Fairley had to write to the Presiding Officer admitting he'd got his answer badly wrong. It's painfully clear the SNP government does not understand the impact of energy consenting decisions on rural communities. Farmers are listening with despair. Does the Minister agree with me that net zero should not be achieved at the expense of farmers' livelihoods, and that the SNP government must urgently establish the impact new transmission infrastructure will have on the agricultural sector?
Minister.
I kind of lost the last point of Tess White's question because of the noise from her colleagues. But the specific point that she has asked me is that if I'm correct in hearing what she said, is that we favour net zero over farming. That is simply not the case. We have shown time and time again that we are working with our farming community to make sure that we achieve net zero with the farming community working with us.
Question 4, Rachel Hamilton.
To ask the Scottish Government how many licences for gull management were awarded in Eyemouth for 2025.
Minister.
NatureScot has received 4 applications to manage gulls to protect public health and safety in Eyemouth this year, and 3 licences have been issued. 1 licence was refused. However, NatureScot have now met with that applicant and are working with them on the details of their application.
Rachel Hamilton.
Thank Jim Fairley for that answer, but despite acknowledging that aggressive seagulls are a health and safety issue, NatureScot originally refused to grant any gull management licences to businesses in Eyemouth. Instead, they told my constituents to use dogs. But within 24 hours, NatureScot U-turned and granted 2 of the licence applications, apologising for the way these applications were handled. So firstly, can I ask the Minister if he too will apologise to my constituents who have described the gull licensing process as soul-destroying? And secondly, if he personally endorses NatureScot's ridiculous suggestion to use dogs in a rooftop seagull sniffer patrol? If so, should my constituents be training spaniels to scale scaffolding, attaching Labradors to drones, or giving parachutes to poodles?
Minister.
The tone in which Rachel Hamilton has just approached that question is rather disappointing on the basis that we recognise that this is an issue for people. We also recognise that when NatureScot have got it wrong, which she has clearly demonstrated in her question, they have rectified that. And if NatureScot are going to apologise to her constituents, that will be up to NatureScot to do. If NatureScot will apologise to her constituents, that will be up to them to do. In terms of what we're doing with regards to licensing for seagulls, I have had this conversation with Douglas Ross, with Fergus Ewing and many others about absolutely accepting that there are issues here around seagulls who are causing problems to people living in certain areas. That's why I'm hosting a seagull summit in Nairn later in the year, in the north. It'll either be Inverness or Nairn, somewhere in that area. It's not been decided yet. And when we have that, we will be discussing what happens around seagulls in urban populations right across the country.
Briefly, Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. From Eyemouth to Elgin, people are being attacked by these gulls, but Nature Scot do not record any of these instances. Does the Minister believe that Nature Scot should record that information and take it into cognizance when they are either approving or rejecting these applications?
Minister.
That's a very fair point. If Mr Ross wants me to put that on the record, I certainly will when I have my discussions with Nature Scot. But the purpose for getting a licence is causing health and safety issues, which is already in the licensing application process. So I'm happy to take on board the point that he's put to me, and when we discuss this further, how we're going to protect people from marauding seagulls, then we'll take that into account.
Question 5, Annabel Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of the latest export statistics for Scotland's food and drink sector.
Cabinet Secretary.
Scottish food and drink exports remain a cornerstone of the economy, valued at £7.5 billion in 2024. And the latest HMRC figures for the first quarter of 2025 highlight a positive outlook, with a rise of 5.1% compared to the same period last year. Now, the Scottish Government is committed to helping the sector with its exporting ambitions. And since 2014, we've invested over £7 million in the Scotland Food and Drink Export Plan, supporting market growth through a network of global specialists. And a new 6-point export plan has also recently been announced to further support businesses, including those in the food and drink sector, in expanding their international reach.
Annabel Ewing.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her answer. And whilst it is undoubtedly the case that the Scottish food and drink sector does punch above its weight, and I do welcome the latest figures, there must nonetheless surely be opportunities to grow the export market. And in that regard, one clear structural barrier is the lack of any direct ferry for freight to continental Europe. So will the Cabinet Secretary therefore agree, in terms of her interest as champion of Scotland's food and drink sector, to now raise this issue with the Deputy First Minister, with whom I have already met on the matter, with the Cabinet Secretary for Transport, with whom I have corresponded on the matter, to finally get the Rosyth to Dunkirk ferry proposal over the line?
Cabinet Secretary.
Annabel Ewing raises a really important point, and I think, of course, Scottish ministers would want to see Scotland's sea connections with Europe enhanced. Now, I know that both the Deputy First Minister and the Cabinet Secretary for Transport have met with the project sponsors regarding the Rosyth to Dunkirk ferry proposal to highlight that support, as well as to offer more practical advice too. But the recently announced SPS agreement between the UK and the EU, which the Scottish Government had long been calling for, is expected to remove some of those barriers that we know our exporters have faced since Brexit, and that have also compromised the viability of projects like the Rosyth to Dunkirk ferry. So the ball's now in the UK Government's court to really get that SPS agreement over the line. But I just want to assure the member that that engagement between our officials is still very much ongoing.
Brief supplementary, Tim Eagle.
It is, of course, great to see Scotland's wonderful produce doing so well in export markets. They are a major employer, 10% of jobs in areas like the Highlands and Islands up in my area. There are, though, recruitment challenges in the sector, and whilst undoubtedly there are short-term factors for this, we must also plan for the future. Highland Show is just around the corner, and that will surely have a focus on rural skills and jobs. What more can the Cabinet Secretary do to promote the food and drinks jobs sector jobs as a career choice?
Cabinet Secretary.
Tim Eagle raises a really important point, and we want to see a really thriving food and drink sector because it is so important for our economy. We'd actually had a session in Parliament not that long ago with our wider food and drink industry, which was focused specifically on skills and seeing what more we can do there. I think we have got some really great programmes underway that have been undertaken in our agriculture sector, as an example, when you look at Ringlink and the work that the machinery rings are doing to get younger people into the industry. And there is a whole host of work going on, but more than happy to have further discussions with him, and no doubt looking forward to catching up with him at the Royal Highland Show and engaging in more of these discussions over the course of the next few days.
Okay, question 6, David Torrance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when it anticipates that Nature Scot will complete its review of the bird species on the Schedule 2 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981.
Minister.
Species on Schedule 2 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act has been completed by Nature Scot, and the Scottish Government is currently considering the findings from the review and will provide an update on the next steps in due course.
David Torrance.
Our approach to environmental issues has changed enormously since 1981, and it is only right that legislation should be considered periodically to determine whether it needs to replace or amend. However, the Scottish Government has the powers to prohibit hunting of ptarmigan while a lengthy process takes its course. Could the Minister clarify if this approach has been considered?
Minister.
I appreciate the concerns that are raised by the member regarding the timescales for this review. However, good governance requires that consideration is given to the full range of evidence relating to all red and amber listed species on Schedule 2 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act. We know that land management practices such as habitat improvement and predator control can have benefits to red-listed bird species in certain circumstances. And we want to ensure that the changes to Schedule 2 do not lead to unintended consequences.
A couple of brief supplementaries. First, Colin Smith.
Thank you, President Officer. When the Minister gives consideration to that review, will he also include a commitment to considering full cost recovery from licence applicants so the public no longer subsidise private interests when licences are granted for killing protected species?
Minister.
As I've just outlined to the member, we are having a review of the piece of work that has been done, and we will publish that when the time comes.
And Beatrice Wishart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I've been made aware of a potential release of non-native game birds in Shetland. Islands are more sensitive to the establishment of non-native species, which can impact the environment and compete with native species. Will the Minister work with Nature Scot to increase awareness of the importance of not bringing in or releasing non-native species in islands? And will consideration be given to legislative measures to restrict non-native game bird releases?
Minister.
The member raised a very specific point which I don't have access to. If she wants to write to me, I'll be more than happy to have a look at it and get back to her.
Thank you. Question 7, Willie Coffey.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on any progress with the provisions in the Agriculture and Rural Communities Scotland Act 2024, including how they might affect farming and food production in Ayrshire.
Minister.
The Agriculture and Rural Communities Scotland Act 2024 will commence on the 16th of June, providing the powers to introduce the consulted upon future support framework to enable payments to be made under the 4 tiers. We remain committed to direct payments, and the Act provides flexibility to deliver this throughout changing circumstances while realising the vision for agriculture and delivering on our commitment to support agriculture and rural communities. As required by the Act, this Rural Support Plan will set out how support will deliver the Act's objectives and the wider Scottish Government priorities over a 5-year period starting from 2026.
Willie Coffey.
I thank the Minister for that answer. As he knows, we're very proud of the wonderful food offering we have across Ayrshire, many of which I've mentioned in the Chamber before. One of the hopes that we have is to see products much more on the shelves of our local supermarkets so that local people can easily identify and buy locally produced food to support our producers. Is that something that the new Act might help to encourage? And could the Minister update the Chamber on how he may be engaging with the sector to improve this?
Minister. Well, I absolutely take on board the point that Willie Coffey made, and he has been a very strong advocate for his constituency. But we have committed £15 million over 2023 to 2026 to support delivery of Scotland's food and drink strategy, sustaining Scotland supplying the world. Now, this funding facilitates a range of activities and direct engagement with grocery retailers to help increase the volume of Scottish food and drink on our retail shelves. In addition, we work closely with Scottish Grocers Federation and support their Go Local campaign, which is helping to transform convenience stores with dedicated display space for local produce.
Thank you. Question 8, Ros McCall.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government, as part of its policies on managing deer numbers, how it's supporting public bodies such as local authorities and NHS boards to use more Scottish venison in any catering that they are responsible for.
Minister.
I thank Ros McCall for that question, because it allows me to put on the record that whilst menu content will be decided locally, there is much work underway with the Scottish Government to facilitate the uptake of venison across the public sector. That includes a successful pilot with Wild Jura, Argyll and Bute Council and Food for Life to supply venison into 6 primary schools. Officials are working collaboratively to explore opportunities to increase demand for venison and develop options to increase supply by helping the sector to make the most of the various routes to markets such as wholesale and framework agreements used widely across the public sector.
Ros McCall.
I thank the Minister for the answer, and I have listened intently, but FOI data indicates that public bodies don't tend to include venison in pupil and patient meals. The nutritional benefits have been emphasised by Basque, who teaches school children about venison through their Hill to Grill educational events. In an effort to improve deer management and to make good use of quality meat, the Perthshire-based Glenkilry Larder participate in a project which has seen venison donated to local schools and food banks. And at a critical point in the Nature Environment Bill process through Parliament, what additional steps will the Scottish Government take to ensure that this healthy low-fat meat appears on school and hospital menus specifically over the nation?
Minister.
Well, the member actually raises a very good point. I would like to correct one thing. I think I'm right in saying that Finlay Carson actually brought the point up to me before that in his local authority they were actually supplying venison. But she's absolutely right to point it out as one of the things that we want to make sure that we need to stop looking at deer management as a problem. Deer management is absolutely something that we should be embracing, as something that we should be adding to our natural larder, and it's something that the Scottish Government are very committed to doing.
And supplementary, Mercedes Vialba.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As a high-protein, sustainable food source, Scottish venison should be available to everyone. Yet I've heard reports of land managers burying deer rather than allow it to be processed to feed the nation. What action is the Scottish Government taking to prevent wealthy landowners from blocking venison for the many?
Minister.
I actually don't accept the premise of the question. The deer management processes that we're going through, which I think is a vital one in order to allow us to do nature restoration and habitat, reducing the damage to habitat. But as I say, deer are not a problem species. They are part of our natural heritage, which we should be able to put into our public processing and our food and our larders so that we can all enjoy it.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes portfolio questions on rural affairs, land reform and islands. There will be a brief pause before we move to the next portfolio.
Thank you. The next portfolio this afternoon is Health and Social Care. And at question number 1, I call Gordon MacDonald.
To ask the Scottish Government what proportion of care home providers have reported recruitment difficulties since the UK left the EU.
Minister Tom Arthur.
In 2018, the Scottish Government published a report on the contribution of EU workers in the social care workforce, which was repeated for comparison in 2022. In 2018, 37.9% of care home provider respondents reported experiencing difficulty in recruiting staff. This figure increased to 75% in the 2022 report. Compounding these difficulties, respondents across all services in 2022 reported a drop in applications from EU nationals. Although it is difficult to disentangle the impact of Brexit from other pressures on the social care labour market, the 2022 report found Brexit is among the factors resulting in the sector having less flexibility to respond to ongoing labour supply challenges.
Gordon MacDonald.
I thank the Minister for that answer. The Labour Government's changes in the visa regulations, including salary thresholds, visa fees and sponsor licences, have created chronic staff shortages. What discussions has the Scottish Government had with its UK counterpart regarding caring roles being added to the shortage occupation list to ease visa restrictions?
Minister.
Gordon MacDonald is correct. The Labour UK Government's plans to end international recruitment of care workers will have a profoundly negative and potentially catastrophic impact on the social care sector. We have tried to engage with the UK Government to provide clear, evidence-based proposals outlining workable adjustments that would better support Scotland's labour market without compromising the UK Government's broader objectives. However, Labour's immigration white paper shows no substantive recognition of the policy proposals submitted by the Scottish Government.
Question number 2, Kevin Stewart, who's joining us remotely. Mr Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on what action it has taken to support NHS Grampian since it was escalated to Stage 4 of NHS Scotland's National Performance Framework for Finance, Leadership and Governance.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Thank you, President Officer. My officials continue to work closely with NHS Grampian on a daily basis, when the Government remains committed to providing the Health Board with the support it needs to stabilise and sustainability to improve. One of the initial stages of the escalation is the whole system diagnostic that we have commissioned, and this involves KPMG reviewing key areas of NHS Grampian's activity. We expect the initial findings of this review to be available mid-July, and this in turn will help to inform a tailored package of support for the Board and the agreement of an improvement plan for NHS Grampian with detailed actions and timescales to follow.
Kevin Stewart.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. But one of the key things which I have concerns about is the additional bureaucracies that have been put in place by NHS Grampian. And I think one of the ways of solving some of these difficulties and getting NHS Grampian back on track is to listen to the frontline staff who feel ignored. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary if the work that is being undertaken will involve communication with, and more importantly, listening to frontline staff who often have the ability to resolve some of the difficulties that exist?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, it absolutely will. I very much acknowledge and welcome, appreciate the work that Mr Stewart has been consistent in bringing forward, representing the interests of local staff as well as patients, and agree that meaningful partnership working will be key in terms of NHS Grampian successfully developing and implementing an improvement plan. NHS Grampian must work closely with their staff side, trade union and professional organisation representatives in their area partnership forum, ensuring that they listen and respond to concerns raised by staff and that their views help to inform future activity. And we similarly expect the meaningful engagement of local clinical views, not least through the Health Board's area clinical forum. The Government's Assurance Board will look for evidence of this meaningful partnership working around the development and implementation of NHS Grampian's improvement plan, so that we can absolutely benefit from the frontline staff's ability to see a way of navigating through the challenges, as Mr Stewart rightly points out.
Supplementary, Tess White.
Cabinet Secretary, swinging cuts in NHS Grampian will decimate as many as 79 services for patients, including a vital X-ray facility at Kincardine Community Hospital. In a bid to cut down overtime pay, face-to-face appointments deemed unnecessary could soon stop. This is a crisis of the SNP's making due to the years of underfunding. It's clear that balance sheets are being prioritised over vulnerable patients. Can the Cabinet Secretary tell my constituents how long this dire situation will go on for?
Cabinet Secretary.
I expect NHS Grampian and all boards to take proportionate decisions that will ensure that there is a sustainable level of service delivery, that's sustainable financially, but also in terms of what patients can expect to receive from those providing services. NHS Grampian is in a particularly acute position, which is why they've been escalated through the framework, not in a punitive way, but in a way to provide support. And I expect both the work that the Government provides to the board, as well as KPMG, to make sure that there are options available so that patient-facing services can be protected, and actually that we can see an enhancement in the performance of NHS Grampian, so that the patients of NHS Grampian can feel the benefit.
And supplementary, Mercedes Vialba.
Thank you. Ambulances are a lifeline at a time of desperate need, but figures show that more than half of ambulances in Scotland were stuck on hospital forecourts for more than 45 minutes so far in 2025. One of those was my constituent, who spent 7 hours overnight in a sweltering ambulance waiting for a bed in the ARI with no food or drink after having had a stroke. A spokesperson for NHS Grampian said it is regrettable and has apologised, but the fact remains this is an institution in stage 4 facing sustained pressure and with the lowest number of beds per head of population in the country. So can I ask the Minister what he is doing to support NHS Grampian to increase capacity?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you. The situation that Mercedes Vialba recounts is not just regrettable, it's unacceptable. And that is an example of a reason as to why we have escalated NHS Grampian to level 4 in the escalation framework, so that we can provide additional assistance to improve their unscheduled care pathway. We recognise that the difficulty in ambulance turnaround times at the Aberdeen Royal Infirmary, it was part of the reason behind the critical incident that we saw before Christmas, and everything that we are doing is to support patients having a better flow through the system. That includes through enhanced frailty services within ARI, it includes through call before you convey that the ambulance service is taking forward, and an escalation in hospital at home services. All of these areas to alleviate pressure on unscheduled care pathways, so that the experience of Mercedes Alba's constituent that she's recounted today do not happen to others.
Question number 3, Oliver Mundell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to ensure residents in Eskdale can access patient transport for hospital appointments.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In October 2024, the Scottish Government published the Transport to Health Delivery Plan, which sets out commitments against transport and healthcare across the work of Health and Social Care and Transport Scotland. Through the plan, we will continue to work with NHS boards to re-emphasise the need for health boards to consider patient access as part of the care pathway. And the plan also recognises that collaborative working between NHS boards, regional transport partnerships and other partners like community transport providers is absolutely necessary in delivering service planning and decision-making, helping to address longer distances for healthcare.
Oliver Mundell.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. I think Langham's one of the places they should start. A recent public meeting saw over 300 people crowd into the Buccleuch Centre, and one of the top issues was the difficulty getting to the DGRI hospital in Dumfries. In a best-case scenario, the journey involves getting 6 buses on a round trip, taking over 4 hours, and that's just not realistic for the elderly, sick and those unable to drive. Given what the Cabinet Secretary said, does he recognise this is an unfair ask? And will he raise these concerns with the board and ensure that alternative arrangements are put in place? For example, the increased use of technology, re-establishing some clinics at the Thomas Hope Hospital and exploring whether more use could be made of services at Carlisle Hospital, as was the case in the past.
Cabinet Secretary.
I very much appreciate Oliver Mundell raising this and the tenor in which he has raised it on behalf of his constituents. Coming from an island community, as I do, I recognise that travelling for healthcare and other services is a challenge and is often necessary. But we want to minimise that, and we want to make it as accessible as possible for people to be able to access services. I will, of course, off the back of his representation, raise this concern with NHS Dumfries and Galloway and explore some of the options that he has set out as being alternatives. We set out yesterday the service renewal framework, which is about shifting the balance of care, using innovation and technology in order to provide a more equitable access for people to be able to get access to services. And so the points that he raises very much aligns with the policy direction that we're seeking to take forward.
Question number 4, Colin Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to reports that nearly 40% of adults in Dumfries and Galloway are not registered with an NHS dentist.
Minister Jenny Minto.
Officer, in recognition of the particularly challenging circumstances in Dumfries and Galloway, the Scottish Government will continue to provide additional financial assistance to the Health Board in 25-26, including to deliver additional evening clinics for unregistered priority patients. My officials also continue to work closely with the Health Board and meet with the Director of Dentistry on a regular basis.
Colin Smith.
Minister, the reality is the registration rate is actually not just the lowest in the country, it's getting worse. There are nearly 3,000 fewer adults registered than this time last year, so it's pretty clear that the work the Government are taking at the moment is simply not working. Now, does the Minister recognise if the Government had, first of all, acted on warnings from NHS Dumfries and Galloway over 5 years ago that a crisis was looming, my constituents wouldn't be having to go private to get health care from a dentist? And given that the actions of the Government are clearly not working, what more is the Government going to do, and when is it going to start to have an impact?
Minister. I thank Colin Smith for his supplementary question, and as in my answer I recognise that there was issues in Dumfries and Galloway that the Government is currently working closely with the Health Board. This situation isn't just within Scotland, it's also across the 4 nations of the United Kingdom. And I have been working closely with my counterparts in each of the nations and the directors of dentistry as well across each of the nations to ensure that we can get a 4-country solution. We need to improve the pipeline of dentists coming into the country, and also those that are here, trained in other countries, have got the right training to allow them to step up to become dentists. In this year's programme for government, we have increased dentistry spend by 15% to the highest proportion that it is, and we're also working closely with more rural boards to ensure that specific payments to encourage rural dentists or dentists to move to rural and island locations are more targeted.
Supplementary from Lena Whittam, hopefully with reference to the question, which concerns, of course, access to NHS dentistry in Dumfries and Galloway.
As the Minister has touched on, increasing the dental workforce plays a crucial role in improving access to NHS dentistry in Dumfries and Galloway, but wider across all of our rural areas. Can the Minister say more about the steps which the Scottish Government has taken to support the dental workforce pipeline in Scotland, especially in the rural areas, where the need is acute and it sees far too many of our constituents travelling extensively to secure treatment, oftentimes in pain?
Minister.
I thank Helena Whittam for her question. And the Scottish Government's Operational Improvement Plan sets out a package of actions to improve the NHS dental workforce now and into the future in Dumfries and Galloway and across Scotland. And as I have said earlier, it is supported by additional funding in 2025-26. And alongside this, we are also working with NHS boards, as I indicated, to refine the financial incentives in place to support dentists moving to work in rural areas, supporting sustainable access across Scotland.
And supplementary, Finlay Carson, again with reference to Dumfries and Galloway.
Can the Minister state whether dentists, access to NHS dentists are getting better or worse since the Government's additional funding?
Minister.
I thank Finlay Carson for his question, and we'd like to report, if I can find it in my notes, that Public Health Scotland statistics published in May show that over 4.2 million courses of treatment were delivered to patients in 24-25 financial year, and over 1 million patients were seen by an NHS dentist in the quarter ending March 2025. As I have indicated, I recognise that we have...
members, could we let the Minister respond? I think she's getting on to Dumfries and Galloway.
Dumfries and Galloway, and we are doing what we can to improve access to dentistry across the region.
Question number 5, I call Douglas Lumsden.
To ask the Scottish Government what urgent action it has taken to address GP waiting times in NHS Grampian in light of reports of ongoing staffing shortages, delayed discharges and critical incidents.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. I want to make it easier for people to see their GP, and I'm taking steps to address the challenges facing general practice. That includes ensuring that a greater proportion of new NHS funding goes to primary and community care. GPs play an incredibly important role, and we want to see more of them in Scotland. That is why we are determined to increase the number of GPs by 800 by 2027, with an additional 360 GPs added since 2017. As of the 11th of November 2024, the GP specialty training establishment is just over 1,200, a record level in Scotland.
Douglas Lumsden.
Thank you, President Officer. I've had a number of constituents contact me regarding the inability to get a GP appointment within a reasonable timescale. And last week, NHS Grampian announced £23 million worth of spending cuts. These cuts include stopping certain face-to-face appointments. Routine test results will also only be given over phone or letter. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, what steps are being taken to improve long-term workforce planning for medical services in areas like Inverurie to ensure sustainable staffing levels and continuity of care for local patients?
Cabinet Secretary.
I would reiterate to Douglas Lumsden the point I made in my first answer, the fact that we have got a record level of GP trainee establishment in Scotland, sitting at 1,200. We've got more to do in terms of making sure that they are able to get into employment, and we're currently working with the BMA General Practice Committee on finding a sustainable route through funding pressures that they are facing, which is hindering the employment of GPs in Scotland. I would also point him to the ScotGem programme, which is looking at specifically at rural medical degrees and making sure that we have rural medical training coming through the system to ensure that we can support those rural communities that need access to general practitioners here in Scotland.
Supplementary, Nico.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. GPs are very much at the heart of our health system, so it's vital that we move forward with work to increase timely access. I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary can advise how the steps outlined in the programme for government will build on its work to improve GP waiting times in NHS Grampian.
Cabinet Secretary.
I very much recognise and I'm grateful for the point that Audrey Nicholl has made around ensuring that we improve access to general practice. It's a frustration that I recognise has been felt by too many of our constituents, and the steps that have been outlined in the programme for government include 100,000 enhanced GP appointments for those with key risk factors for cardiovascular disease, including blood pressure, high cholesterol, high blood sugar, obesity and smoking, and who are not currently being treated. This is a new investment in general practice as we look to shift more care to the community in a more preventative way, which is the subject of the Service Renewal Framework, the Population Health Framework, both published this week. More investment will help to sustain general practice and ensure patients can access services locally, and we're working with the BMA to bring that forward. This is alongside the expansion of Pharmacy First services, which pharmacies being the first port of call for many patients and ailments in many cases.
Supplementary, Carl Morgan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Campaign groups from NHS Grampian right down through into my own region of South Scotland believe that there is a shortfall of as many as 1,800 GPs and that this is a more realistic target if the Government hopes to meet its ambitions of achieving greater quality care that is closer to home. Our health service is crying out for more GPs, yet a cut in GP funding means practices are unable to recruit the staff they desperately need. Does the Cabinet Secretary recognise that whilst the training of medical students is important, that it does not matter if students are unable to get employment after graduation?
Cabinet Secretary.
I recognise that final point from Carol Mochan. That's why we are actually increasing investment that's going into general practice. We remain committed to increasing the number of GPs in Scotland by 800 by 2027. GP headcount has consistently over 5,000, with an increase of 360 GPs since 2017, and we're investing over £2.6 million this year in a range of measures to support GPs to remain in the workplace. We are also making good progress against our GP recruitment and retention plan, and we have established a national framework to support the development of early career fellowships. National Education for Scotland have also completed the review of the GP retainer scheme, which will be open to new entrants from August of this year.
A supplementary, Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Yesterday in the statement I mentioned the very constructive meeting I had with Dr Robert Lockhart from Elgin and his colleagues, and while the Cabinet Secretary gave me a positive response, he didn't answer the specifics. So can I ask him, what percentage of the current health budget is spent on general practice, and what percentage does the Cabinet Secretary believe it should be to allow GPs to deliver all of the services they believe they can?
Recognise the position that the BMA has set out, that the percentage of the NHS budget going to general practice is not sufficient, and that's why we're working with the BMA in order to increase the investment to go into general practice. As I said in response to Carol Mochan, we've already given an increase to general practice funding this year. There are further initiatives that have come through the budget and through programme for government, including the additional cardiovascular enhanced services that we negotiated with the BMA. But I recognise Douglas Ross's point that we need to, if we are to truly shift the balance of care, we also need to shift the balance of resource, and that is what I'm currently working on with the BMA in order to achieve just that.
Question number 6, Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it will support NHS Tayside to improve its physical infrastructure to help to deliver better health outcomes.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. The Scottish Government has increased NHS Tayside's formula capital by 5% for essential maintenance and equipment replacement. We have also approved projects to progress with multi-year essential maintenance upgrades for electrical and ventilation systems at Nine Wells and Perth Royal Infirmary, which will require over £60 million of investment. Over the next 2 years, we will also provide £12 million of capital funding to take over the lease of 4 GP practices: Comrie Medical Centre, Stanley Medical Practice, Arthurstone Medical Centre and Nethergate Medical Practice. We're also working with all health boards to develop a whole system NHS infrastructure investment plan, and will shortly be asking NHS Tayside to identify their 3 strategic capital priorities.
Maurice Golden.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Nine Wells Hospital has served the people of Dundee for more than 50 years, but there's a growing difficulty and cost of maintaining the ageing building. It again raises the question, would Tayside be better served by a new hospital? Will the Cabinet Secretary conduct a review comparing the cost-effectiveness of continued maintenance versus a new facility?
Cabinet Secretary.
Again, I refer back to the conclusion of my last answer to Maurice Golden, where I said that we have asked NHS Tayside to identify their 3 strategic capital priorities. That is the review that he's asking for to ensure that it can inform the whole system NHS infrastructure investment plan, and we await their priorities with interest.
Question number 7, Craig Hoy.
Discussions the Health Secretary has had with ministerial colleagues and NHS Lothian regarding the provision of education and tutoring for sick children at the Royal Hospital for Children and Young People in Edinburgh and other NHS facilities and services.
Minister Jenny Minto.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Section 14 of the Education Scotland Act 1980 places a statutory duty upon local authorities to make special arrangements for any child or young person who is absent from school for a prolonged period due to ill health, which enables them to continue with their education whilst away from their regular school. I can confirm officials have discussed this matter with Edinburgh Council. NHS Lothian and the City of Edinburgh Council both recognise their responsibilities under this statutory duty, and they have set up the Little France Teaching Centre within the hospital using teachers employed by the Council. This service is available for all children and young people during their stay in the hospital.
Craig Hoy.
The Minister should be aware of the case involving Lawrence, one of my constituents who suffers from leukaemia. Lawrence had the distress of watching other children on his ward receiving education from Edinburgh City Council's hospital schooling service at the Sick Kids. But he was denied it because he attends a school in the independent sector, and his parents could not pay the £115 an hour that the council charges in these circumstances. Since I raised the case of Lawrence, more parents have been in touch with me and with bodies representing independent schools, highlighting similar injustices. Several involve children with a disability being refused access to or having specialist equipment such as aids for hearing impairment being withdrawn because they attend independent schools. Will the Minister now commit to urgently work with the Education Secretary, with councils, with the independent school sector and NHS boards to reach a resolution that ends this unjust discrimination against sick and disabled children in Scotland?
Minister. I thank Craig Hoy for his supplementary question. Yes, I was aware of the situation with his constituent Lawrence. As I believe Ms Gilruth said, this is ultimately a decision for Ms Gilruth to take. However, I am very happy to work with her on this situation. Yes, exactly. From a health perspective, I am content to work with Ms Gilruth around this area.
Supplementary for Chowdhury.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I have been contacted by constituents who share Mr Hoy's concern on this issue. Councillors say the policy regarding learning for sick children who attend independent schools is based on Scottish Government guidance, which places the duty for tuition on independent schools themselves. Clearly, there has been a miscommunication. Can the Minister advise what effort the Scottish Government is making to inform parents, school and the health boards of this policy?
Minister. I thank Faisal Chowdhury for his follow-up question, and he is right that whilst the Scottish Government has provided national guidance on the continued responsibility to provide education whilst a child or young person is unable to attend school due to ill health, the decisions about the fees to be charged for hospital education services are a matter for local authorities and the NHS boards to consider with independent schools as appropriate. But as I've just said in response to Mr Hoy, I'm very happy to work with Ms Gilruth from the health perspective to ensure that we find a solution to this situation.
Question number 8, Miles Briggs.
To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of the eligibility criteria for rapid cancer diagnostic services, including the rationale for them usually only being available to those over the age of 18 in light of the unique challenges faced by children and young people being diagnosed with cancer.
Minister Jenny Minto.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Rapid cancer diagnostic services provide primary care with access to a fast-track diagnostic pathway for non-specific symptoms suspicious of cancer, like weight loss and fatigue, with eligibility criteria clinically agreed. All RCDSs and non-specific cancer pathways across the UK have similar criteria for referral. Children and young people have specific and well-established referral guidelines through the Scottish Referral Guidelines for Suspected Cancer, which have been recently clinically reviewed, and the update will be published in July. This will be supported by education resources to support primary care, make the most appropriate referral to the most appropriate pathway.
I thank the Minister for the answer, but cancer is the leading cause of disease-related death in children and young people under 25. However, this group often face significant barriers to a timely cancer diagnosis, including misdiagnosis, exhibiting vague or non-specific symptoms, and having to visit their GP or other health providers multiple times before being referred and diagnosed. Yet, despite these challenges, Scottish Government initiatives to support early diagnosis, such rapid diagnostic centres are typically focused on older Scots and adults and not children and young people. So can I ask what action the Government is taking to address this gap, given the clear need for earlier and more accurate diagnosis of this age group?
Minister. I thank Miles Briggs for bringing to the Chamber this important area. Clearly we need the separation between adult and paediatric services, and to that end we launched the Collaborative and Compassionate Cancer Care, the Cancer Strategy for Children and Young People in Scotland, in 21 to 26 in September 21. It emphasises the Scottish Government's commitment to improving services nationally and supporting a consistent approach to care and treatment across the country. And this continues from the established MSN CYPC, a dedicated network of cancer specialists to support children and young people with cancer who are delivering on this strategy.
Brief supplementary, David Torrance.
Can I ask the Minister how rapid cancer diagnostic services are helping to speed up treatment and improve outcomes for people across Scotland?
Minister. Thank you. A report published by the University of Strathclyde in February 2024 found the services are achieving what they set out to do, find cancer, while delivering a high standard of quality care at speed. The overall median time for RCDS referral to diagnosis was 14 days. To date, we have established 6 successful rapid cancer diagnostic services, significantly reducing the time taken from referral to diagnosis for those with non-specific symptoms of cancer. Our 6th RCDS was launched last month in NHS Forth Valley.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes portfolio questions on health and social care. There will be a brief pause before we turn to the next item of business to allow frontbench teams to quickly change position. Thank you.